Inside a quiet Midwestern town, a black diner owner served coffee to a Hell's Angel no one wanted around. A few minutes later, 2 police officers arrived and insulted both of them right inside her diner. Things escalated when they threatened to draw their guns, but the black owner stood up, defended the man from the police, and kicked them out. That one act made the entire town turn its back on her. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Before we dive deeper, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The evening sun hadn't yet dipped below the horizon behind Pineville, but the faint orange glow of dusk was already casting long shadows over the town's cracked sidewalks and boarded-up storefronts. A quiet mist clung to the fields like it didn't want to let go. The silence felt like it had been there for years, just waiting for someone brave enough to interrupt it. Inside Maya's diner, the only black-owned diner for miles, the lights flickered to life with a soft hum. Maya Johnson stood behind the counter, holding her breath for a moment before letting it go with a quiet sigh. She always paused there every evening, right before unlocking the front door, as if asking herself if she had the strength to face another night. She wore her mother's old apron, frayed at the edges but clean. Her locks were tied back neatly under a deep green head wrap. Her eyes, those deep brown eyes, carried a quiet fatigue, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from caring too much for too long. Her hands moved by memory, now flipping the sign to open, wiping down the front counter, straightening the salt shakers, checking the register. Only $34 in the till. Again, she swallowed the knot in her throat and turned toward the coffee machine. As the aroma of fresh brew filled the room, she allowed herself a single breath of comfort. Then the bills in her purse flashed in her mind. Unpaid electricity, her father's medication, and the hospital deposit she still couldn't cover. Maya poured herself a cup and walked to the window. Outside Main Street was lifeless. The hardware store had been boarded up for 3 years. The factory closed last spring. Only the gas station was still hanging on, run by an old couple who hadn't smiled at her since she was 10. The diner had once been the soul of this town, especially back when her mother, Evelyn Johnson, ran it. People used to laugh here, eat together, talk about things that mattered. But after Evelyn passed and Maya took over, everything got quieter. People stopped coming. Some said nothing, just stopped showing up. Others offered tight smiles and fake compliments. And then there were those who came in just to remind her without saying a word that she didn't really belong. Not here. Not in Pineville. She sat down at one of the corner booths and opened a worn notebook labeled Dad. Inside were lists, his medications, therapy schedules, bills. Her pen hovered over the words for a moment. Her hand trembled slightly as she added, "Ask Dr. Harlan for another payment plan." Her father's voice used to fill this place, booming, joyful, full of song. Now it only echoed in her memory. After the stroke, he couldn't walk, couldn't speak. Maya had been the one to carry him out of the house that night. She remembered his fingers wrapped around hers, the panic in his eyes. The man who once carried her on his shoulders couldn't hold a fork now. The bell above the door chimed. Maya stood quickly, forcing a smile that hadn't reached her eyes in months. "Evening, Hank," she said as the old trucker walked in. Hank nodded without a word, slid into a booth, and picked up the laminated menu like he hadn't read it every evening for 20 years. She brought over his coffee, setting it down gently. Same as usual, he gave the slightest nod. Eyes? Never leaving the menu. There used to be regulars. Now it was just Hank. Sometimes Maya moved back behind the counter and pulled out the ledger. Pages of red ink greeted her, circled in bold. She ran her fingers through her locks and stared at the numbers like they might change if she stared hard enough. They didn't. Another hour passed. The second customer never came. She refilled the salt at each table just for something to do. The radio played softly an old soul tune her mother used to hum. Maya hummed along under her breath, letting the rhythm carry her back just for a moment to when her mother was still alive, still flipping pancakes in the back, still yelling at Maya to get those elbows off the counter. Then a knock broke her rhythm. Not at the door, at the window. Maya turned. 2 boys, maybe 15, stood outside. They stared for a moment, then one of them mouthed something too fast to catch. He laughed, slapped his friend's shoulder, and they both ran off. Maya walked over and wiped away the fog from the glass with her sleeve. And there it was. On the window, drawn in the condensation, were the words, "Go back to where you came from." She stared at it, frozen, not angry, not shocked, just numb. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She took a dish towel from her apron and wiped it clean like she'd done 100 times, maybe 1,000. Inside her chest, something tightened, but she didn't let it surface. She turned, walked back to the counter and poured herself another coffee. Hank had left. No goodbye, no tip, just a crumpled napkin on the table. She cleaned it up without a word. That evening, Maya stood in the kitchen, staring at the last 3 eggs. She cracked 2 into the skillet, whisked them with a dash of pepper, and pushed the thought of breakfast out of her mind. Outside, a group of teenage girls walked by. They looked through the glass, but didn't come in. One of them giggled. Maya didn't bother wondering what they were laughing at anymore. She sat down on the stool by the counter and looked at the photo taped to the register. Her and her mother both wearing aprons, smiling. It was from the day they reopened the diner after repainting the outside. Back when hope was still a word she used. She missed her mother most on nights like this, when the silence felt heavy, when the town reminded her that she would always be just Maya, the girl who didn't fit, no matter how good her coffee was. But still she kept the lights on. Still she cleaned every surface like the president was about to walk in. Still, she held the line because nobody chooses their skin. But everyone deserves a seat at the table. Even if that table was chipped half empty and forgotten by the rest of the world, Maya knew it. Her mother had taught her that. And maybe, just maybe, someone else would walk through that door and remember it too. So, as the moon rose over the horizon and the streetlights flickered to life outside, Maya Johnson locked the front door, swept the floor one last time, and turned the sign to closed. Behind her, the diner stood silent. But inside her, there was still fight left. The chill had settled over Pineville like a wool blanket that no one asked for. The kind of chill that made the air feel thick and mean, pressing down on the sidewalks, rippling off the blacktop in faint mirages. The street outside Maya's diner was quiet, save for the low hum of crickets and the occasional creak of a rusted pickup truck rolling by. Inside the diner, the ceiling fan spun lazily, doing more noise than cooling. The only sound was the rhythmic clink of a spoon tapping against a ceramic mug as Maya stirred sugar into her 3rd cup of coffee for the day. No customers since sunset, just the sound of waiting. She stood behind the counter, wiping the edge of a glass with a towel, more out of habit than necessity. The dinner rush hadn't come. Not that she was surprised. Ever since that run-in with Officer Derrick last month, foot traffic had slowed to a crawl. People in Pineville had long memories and short tolerance for women who talked back, especially black women. It had been just over 3 weeks since the incident, but the words still rang in her ears like it happened yesterday. It was a Friday evening, slow and sticky with chill. Maya had just stepped outside the diner to dump the kitchen trash when she saw the patrol car parked diagonally across the street. Engine still running, door open. A teenage boy, black, maybe 16, was standing with his hands pressed against the hood of the cruiser. His backpack lay on the pavement nearby, torn open. Notebooks and a half-eaten sandwich spilled across the sidewalk. Officer Derek Mason stood behind the boy, one hand on his gun, the other gripping the boy's wrist like it was made of glass he wanted to crack. Maya froze. She looked around, looked. No one else was on the street, just her Derek and that boy who kept shaking his head and whispering something she couldn't hear. She crossed the road fast, but steady heart, pounding harder with each step. "Derek," she called out. "What's going on?" Derek didn't turn. "Business, Maya. Keep walking." "He a customer?" she asked, because if he was headed to my place, this just became my business. Derek let out a low chuckle, dry, humorless. He finally turned his head, saw him hanging outside the hardware store. Looked suspicious. "He's a kid," Maya said flatly. "That's what kids do. They linger. Doesn't mean they're a threat." Derek's eyes narrowed. "You questioning me now? I'm asking why a 16-year-old needs to be manhandled in broad daylight. He wasn't cooperating. Did you ask him his name before pushing him into your hood?" Derek stepped closer. His boots echoed sharply against the pavement. When he was close enough for her to smell the faint scent of coffee and sweat on his breath, he leaned in. "This town's got rules, Miss Johnson. Rules that keep it clean. You do better remembering your place." Maya didn't flinch. "I know my place. It's behind that counter running a business I built with my mother's hands, and it sure as hell isn't watching kids get humiliated on my sidewalk." Derek's jaw clenched. His fingers tightened around the boy's wrist before finally letting go. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. "Maybe," she replied. "But I'd rather make a mistake for doing what's right than stay silent and watch this." He shoved the boy's backpack at him hard. The kid stumbled but caught it. His eyes flicked to Maya for half a second, confused, shaken but grateful. Derek got in his cruiser without another word, slammed the door, and pulled away. Fast tires groaning over the asphalt. The boy didn't speak either. He just bent down, picked up his things, and disappeared down the street without even brushing the dust from his jeans. Maya stood there for a long time after they were both gone. By moonrise, the gossip had already begun. People started skipping the diner that weekend. The next Tuesday, someone slipped a receipt under the door with 2 words written on the back in red ink. "Watch yourself." Back to the present, the bell over the door jingled. Maya didn't look up right away. She assumed it was the mailman or someone looking for directions to the gas station, but the silence that followed was different. Still waited. When she did glance up, her hands froze mid-wipe. He filled the doorway like he wasn't trying to, but couldn't help it. Broad shoulders wrapped in a black leather jacket, scuffed and dusty from the road. His jeans were torn at the knees, boots thick with dirt. His beard was salt and pepper, mostly saltful and tangled. A pair of pale blue eyes, slightly bloodshot, scanned the room with the weary caution of someone who'd been met with too many doors slammed in his face. On his jacket, just above the heart, was a sewn patch with the insignia of a skull, with wings and flames curling out the sides. Hell's Angels. Maya's chest tightened. Every diner has its ghosts. The Hell's Angels were not ghosts in Pineville. They were myths wrapped in leather and trouble. Stories told in whispers at truck stops, rumors about drugs, fights, guns. No one in town ever saw them, but everybody swore they existed, and nobody wanted them nearby. The man took 2 slow steps forward. The floor creaked under his weight. His presence shifted the room. Maya could feel it, an invisible tension, the kind that sat on the back of your neck. Even the fan above them squeaked a little louder, like it knew something was off. He walked to the furthest stool at the counter, the one closest to the emergency exit. He moved stiffly like someone who'd spent too many nights on the road and too many years in pain. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the stool, lowering himself down with effort. Maya studied him for half a breath longer, then folded the towel, set the glass down, and moved toward him. "Welcome to Maya's diner," she said evenly. "Today's special is smoked brisket with sweet cornbread. We also have fresh peach tea and hot coffee. What can I get started for you?" He looked up at her then. Just a second too long, enough for Maya to see it. Not fear, not aggression, grief. His voice was low, scratchy. "Coffee black, fast as you got it." Maya nodded and turned to the pot. As she poured, she noticed it. His right hand shook as it reached up to rub his neck. A faded blue hospital bracelet peeked out from under his sleeve. Not new, but not old either, like he hadn't taken it off, even though he could. She set the mug in front of him. "Hot and strong," she said. "It'll kick like a mule." He let out a tired chuckle, more air than sound. His hand hovered over the mug for a second before finally gripping it. The trembling made the coffee ripple. "You all right?" she asked quietly, not as a waitress, but as a person. He looked up again more directly this time. Something inside him shifted like a wall, lowering just an inch. "My daughter's at Pineville General," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "She's 15, stage 4. They told me to stay close. Just wait." Maya felt the words land in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He nodded once, then looked back down at the mug. "I needed a place to breathe," he added. "Hospital's got too many beeps, too many people whispering like the walls can hear him." Maya didn't speak. She didn't offer cliches or empty hope. She just stood there, hands on the counter, letting the silence hold space for him. After a moment, she asked, "You want something to eat?" He hesitated. "I didn't come in here to cause trouble," he said. "If I make folks nervous, I can go." Maya folded her arms. "Nobody asked you to leave. You're here and you're human. That's enough." He looked at her again, longer this time, then nodded. "I'll take the brisket," he said, "and maybe some of that cornbread if you got it." She smiled softly. "Best in the county. Give me 10 minutes." As she stepped into the kitchen, she glanced toward the window. Sure enough, across the street, Mrs. Caldwell stood on her porch, arms folded, watching. 2 more locals passed by, slowing their steps when they saw the Hells Angels patch. It was already happening. Inside the kitchen, Maya moved with practiced ease. But her thoughts spun. She had seen a lot in her 33 years church fundraisers, protest marches, hospital waiting rooms. But there was something about the man at her counter that clung to her bones. He didn't look like danger. He looked like grief wrapped in denim. She plated the brisket and added 2 warm cornbread muffins brushed with honey. As she slid the plate in front of him, she noticed the tattoo on his forearm. Black ink faded into skin. "Lily, my daughter," he said, catching her glance. Maya gave him a gentle nod. "She's lucky to have a dad who sticks around," she said. His eyes glistened for just a moment before he blinked it away. "I don't know if lucky is the word," he said, "but I told her I'd be here. I meant it." They didn't say much after that. He ate slowly, like every bite cost him effort. Maya busied herself with cleaning, but every so often she looked over and saw the same image a big man made, small by life, holding on with shaking hands and silent hope. When he finished, he reached for his wallet. Maya put a hand on the counter. "It's on me," she said. He paused. "Why?" "Because grief shouldn't eat alone," she answered, "and because no one else offered." He stared at her, unsure how to respond. Then finally he slid the wallet back into his jacket and stood. "My name's Jack," he said. "Jack Harlan." Maya extended her hand. Maya Johnson. They shook. His grip was firm, but she could feel the tremble still hiding beneath the surface. He nodded once more and headed toward the door. Before stepping out, he looked back. "Thank you for not looking at the jacket first." Maya smiled. "Everybody's got a story, Jack. Some just wear theirs on the outside." The bell jingled softly behind him, and for the first time in weeks, the diner didn't feel quite so empty. The midnight moon bled through the dusty windows of Maya's diner, casting a silver haze across the checkerboard floor. Outside, the chill shimmered on the blacktop like a warning. Inside, the air was tense, but still. Jack Harlan sat hunched over his coffee at the far end of the counter, elbows on the Formica, eyes low. The plate in front of him sat mostly untouched, the brisket grown cold. He wasn't here for food. He was here to escape a hospital hallway and the sound of machines measuring his daughter's dying breath. Maya moved quietly behind the counter, wiping a clean surface for the second time in 10 minutes. She didn't want to stare, but she couldn't help glancing toward Jack every so often. His body looked like it had carried too many miles. His silence said more than most men's speeches. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. That she had learned was a form of kindness. Then the bell above the front door chimed again, sharper this time, like a note out of tune. Maya looked up, and her heart sank. Officer Derek Mason stepped inside his boots, thewing hard against the floor with each step. He wore his uniform crisp, the badge gleaming gun at his hip like a third fist. Deputy Sarah Klein followed a step behind her expression unreadable, her blonde hair pulled tight beneath her cap. The air shifted instantly. Maya felt it in her chest. The same way you feel a thunderstorm before it hits. Derek scanned the diner and spotted Jack. A slow smile crept across his face. Not the kind that came from humor, but the kind that came from a man who just found a bruise he wanted to press. "Well, well," Derek said loudly, voice cutting through the room like broken glass. "Didn't expect to see one of the Hells Angels perched here. This must be one hell of a day." Jack didn't look up. Derek stepped closer. "Funny thing, I always heard your kind preferred bars, junkyards, or back alleys. Didn't know you developed a taste for sweet tea and home cooking." Jack lifted his eyes slow and measured. His fingers tightened slightly around the coffee mug. The tremble in his hand returned. "I'm just having dinner," Jack said calmly, voice growly. Derek's laugh turned slightly to Sarah, who didn't laugh with him. She just shifted her weight from one foot to the other and kept her hands behind her back. Derek turned back to Jack. "Name and ID." Jack blinked once. "Excuse me. You heard me. You're wearing a patch I've seen in a dozen police reports. You match a few descriptions. Could be harmless. Could be something else. I'm going to need to see some ID." Jack reached slowly for his wallet, but Derek's hand moved quicker, resting on the grip of his holstered gun. That did it. Maya came out from behind the counter apron, swaying at her hips, face tight. "He's a customer, Derek." Derek didn't turn. "You know who he is? I know he's paid for his food and hasn't broken a single law since he walked in." Derek let out a low whistle and turned to face her. "Well, well, first-name basis, huh?" Maya's heart was pounding now, but her voice stayed steady. "You're not here for dinner. You came in to provoke someone, and I'm not going to let you do that in my place." Derek narrowed his eyes. "This town's got standards, Maya. You might not care who you let through that door, but the rest of us do." Maya took a step forward. This diner was built on two things: food and fairness. I serve anyone who walks through that door. White, black, patched, unformed. You don't get to decide who counts. Derek took a half step toward her, lowering his voice. "You really want to pick this fight with me again?" Maya didn't blink. "I'm not picking anything, but I'm not going to stand by while you harass a man trying to drink his coffee." For a moment, there was only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the pie shelf. Then Jack placed his wallet slowly on the counter. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. Derek ignored him and snatched up the wallet, flipping it open. He stared at the license inside for a beat too long, like he was disappointed it didn't give him a reason to escalate. He tossed it back on the counter. It landed with a dull thud. "No warrants," he muttered. "Guess you live another day." He turned to Sarah, who hadn't moved. "Let's go." Sarah hesitated. Her eyes flicked between Derek, Jack, and Maya. Then, without a word, she followed her superior out. The door swung shut behind them with a heavy clang. Maya stood there, still breathing hard. Her hands were clenched at her sides. Jack reached for his wallet and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at her. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Maya looked back at him, still standing straight. "Yes, I did." He gave her a look she couldn't quite read. A mix of confusion, gratitude, and something else. Respect, maybe. "I've seen that before," Jack said after a moment. "That look in a man's eyes when he wants to make someone small just to feel bigger. Most folks look away." Maya nodded. "I used to," she admitted. "Not anymore." He finished the last sip of his coffee and pushed the mug away. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded again, quieter this time. "Your money's no good here today." Jack started to protest, but she raised a hand. "Don't argue, just take the win." He smiled just a little, then stood up. His jacket creaked as he straightened his back. He moved slower than when he came in. "Named Jack, by the way, Maya." He offered a handshake. She took it. And in that brief moment, the weight of the town, the noise of injustice, the stink of fear, it all quieted. Because sometimes the loudest thing in a room is the one person who refuses to look away. As Jack walked out into the moonlight, Maya stood by the register, heart still racing. She didn't know what would come next. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let anyone decide who was human and who wasn't. Not in her diner. Not on her watch. The next evening, Pineville looked the same on the surface. The sky was its usual muted blue, and the oak trees bordering Main Street stood tall and motionless, casting long gray shadows on the pavement. But something had shifted. The stillness felt colder, more calculated. Maya approached the front of her diner as the moon crept over the horizon. Her steps were slower than usual, not from fear, but from the quiet knowing. The kind of knowing that sinks into your bones after you've crossed an invisible line no one told you existed until it was too late. The cardboard was the first thing she saw. It had been nailed, not taped to the wooden frame of her front door. No criminal sympathizers. The letters were bold and messy, written in thick black paint that had started to drip in spots down the cardboard. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. She stared at it in silence. Her keys stayed frozen in her hand. A single breath passed before she reached forward, yanked the board down with both hands, and dropped it beside the trash can, without a word. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed like it always did, but it felt different. Off-key, too loud in the empty room. Inside, the air was cold. The fridge had gone quiet overnight. Maya glanced at the breaker box in the back and sighed. She already knew what it meant. She walked across the room and flipped the switch anyway. Nothing. The power had been cut. She stood there for a moment, still holding her breath, then exhaled through her nose and rolled her shoulders back. She wasn't going to let the silence drown her. Not today. By 7:30, the lights were still off, the coffee maker dead. She brewed a small pot on the emergency gas stove in the back, poured herself a cup, and sat by the front window. By 8, nobody had come in, not even Hank, the old trucker, who usually slid in without a word. Maya sipped her coffee slowly. She watched the street. A few people walked by. Most didn't look. One man across the street, Greg, from the lumber yard, glanced at her window and then looked away so quickly it was obvious he'd done it on purpose. At 9:30, she counted the money in the tip jar. 4 nickels and a quarter. At 10:15, the phone rang once, then silence. No voicemail, no call back. At noon, she turned off the open sign to save power she wasn't sure she had. That was when she heard the thud, then another. She turned quickly, eyes narrowing. The third hit was louder, wetter. It smeared across the glass of her front window and slid down in a yellow, lumpy trail. Eggs. She stepped toward the window. A tomato came next, then another. One exploded against the frame, leaving a splash of red across the edge of her menu board. She could hear them now laughing. She looked out the window, but couldn't see clearly through the mess. The glass was covered in food and slurs. The words were crude, ugly. Maya stood completely still. She didn't scream. She didn't duck. The laughter faded as quickly as it had come. Tires squealed in the distance. Someone had filmed it. She was sure of it. She walked to the counter, took a breath, and grabbed a towel. No water pressure. The city had cut service again, likely for maintenance, though no one would admit it. She soaked the towel in a tray of melted ice from the unplugged fridge and walked back to the glass. She wiped. The egg didn't want to come off. It smeared instead a slimy film of yolk dragging across the pane. The smell hit her nose, sour, thick. A mix of food gone bad and something worse, cowardice. Her hand shook. She paused, her other hand pressed to the glass, steadying herself. One breath in, one out. Then she kept wiping. Outside, another truck rolled by, slowed down, then kept going. She recognized the driver, Cliff, who used to bring her fresh tomatoes from the farm. He didn't wave. After she finished cleaning the main window, she crouched by the lower panels where someone had scrolled a word she hadn't seen in years. Not since high school. Not since her mom had marched into the principal's office and refused to leave until someone was held accountable. She wiped that too. The glass was clean again. But she wasn't. Not inside. Not today. At 2 in the afternoon, she sat down in the corner booth with a notepad and wrote a list. What's left to pay? Power, water, hospital, groceries, gas. She tapped the end of the pen against the paper. Then she added another word under the list. Dignity. And next to it, still mine. She heard a soft knock on the glass. Her head lifted quickly. Outside stood Miss Harper, the church secretary from down the block. She was in her late 60s, usually wore a floral dress and a serious expression. Maya walked to the door and opened it. Miss Harper didn't smile. I won't come in, she said. I just came to say not everyone agrees with what they're doing to you. Maya didn't respond. Miss Harper shifted on her feet. I don't approve of the biker, but I saw how Derek treated that man. It wasn't right. Maya's hands tightened on the edge of the door. And yet you weren't here yesterday. Miss Harper looked away. I was scared. I still am, Maya said quietly. But I didn't get to leave. There was a long silence. Miss Harper nodded. I'll bring some pies tomorrow. Maya raised an eyebrow. Pies. People trust sugar more than truth, Miss Harper said. Then she turned and walked away. Maya closed the door and locked it. Inside, she leaned against the wood and let herself feel the ache that had built in her chest all day. The betrayal, the isolation, the silence from people who once called her family, but also the flicker of something else. Not quite hope, but defiance. The kind that comes when the worst has been thrown at you and you're still standing. She walked back to the window. There were streaks she had missed, bits of yolk stuck to the edge of the pane, a smear of red under the table lettering. She dipped the rag one more time, and she wiped again and again until her reflection stared back at her. Still here. Still whole. Still hers. The moon hung heavy over Pineville that evening, beating down on the sidewalks like punishment. The air was thick, unmoving, and quiet. Too quiet. Even the crickets had stopped their endless chatter. Inside Maya's diner, the silence had become its own kind of customer. It sat at every table. It filled every empty coffee cup. It stared at her from behind the windows, smeared faintly with the last traces of dried yolk and tomato. Maya stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled apron damp from cleaning again. The rag in her hand had gone dry hours ago, but she kept wiping. Not because it needed it, but because she needed to move, do something, anything to drown out the feeling in her chest, the feeling of being watched, judged, abandoned. No one had come in all day, not a single soul. She hadn't even brewed a second pot of coffee. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself over and over again that doing the right thing had never promised applause. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice, one she didn't want to admit existed, whispered, "Was it worth it?" Across town in a quiet hospital room, Jack Harlan sat beside his daughter's bed. Lily's breathing was soft and shallow, her eyes closed beneath tired lids. The machines around her beeped in soft intervals, reminders that time still passed whether you wanted it to or not. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight. He had always believed in loyalty, brotherhood. But what Maya had done, that was something different. That was courage. And the way that town had turned its back on her for it, that was something he couldn't let stand. He reached for his phone and scrolled through contacts until he found the name. He hadn't called in over a year. Luke Harlan, younger brother, former combat medic, now a patch member of the Hells Angels Central Ridge chapter. Jack stared at the screen for a long moment, then pressed call. "Yeah," Luke's voice crackled through. "It's me." Pause. Jack. Another pause. This one heavier. "Damn. You okay?" "I'm at the hospital," Jack said, keeping his voice low. "It's Lily. Stage 4. A long silence. "Damn, man." "I'm sorry. She's hanging on," Jack said. "But that's not why I'm calling." He took a breath, his voice tightening. "There's a woman here, a diner owner. Her name's Maya Johnson. She helped me the other day. Stood up to a cop who wanted to make an example out of me. I didn't ask her to. She just did it. And now the town's coming down on her hard, trashing her place, cutting her power. Nobody's coming by. She's paying for something I did." Jack's throat burned. "I need you to do something for me." The line went quiet again. Then Luke said, "You want me to call the club?" "No," Jack said. "I want you to bring them." The next day, the moon rose angry and hot. Maya opened the diner at 7:00, same as always. She scrubbed the front door clean again before flipping the sign. She didn't look up to see who was watching. She didn't have the energy. By 8, no one had come. By 9:00, she sat at the front booth, staring out the window, trying not to let her chest cave in. She didn't cry, but she thought about it. At 9:30, the bell over the door jingled. She stood up quickly, too quickly, and wiped her hands on her apron as a man stepped inside. He was tall, built like a fence post, and wore a weathered black vest with small patches stitched neatly on either side. His beard was neat, his expression calm. "Miss Johnson?" he asked. Maya hesitated. "Yes, I'm Luke Harlan, Jack's younger brother." Maya's face softened, but she didn't move from behind the counter. "Is Lily?" "She's still fighting," Luke said. "That girl's tough." Maya nodded. Her voice caught in her throat. Luke looked around the diner for a moment, then stepped closer to the window and peeked outside. "How long has it been like this?" Maya didn't answer right away. "Since the day after your brother came in." He nodded slowly. "Well," he said, pulling a small radio from his pocket. "Let's fix that." He clicked the button and said a single word. "Now," Maya tilted her head, confused. That's when she heard it. A low rumble. Distant, faint at first, like a thunderstorm on the horizon. Then louder and louder. She stepped towards the window, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. And then she saw them. Motorcycles. Dozens, then more. Chrome and leather and rubber tires flooded both ends of Main Street. Engines revving, echoing off the storefronts. It sounded like the sky had cracked open. Maya's breath caught. People stopped on sidewalks, stepped out of stores. Some gawked, others frowned. Within minutes, over 200 motorcycles lined both sides of the street. Then 300 men and women in matching jackets, patches from different chapters, different cities. Some held helmets, some held small flags, others just stood beside their bikes like they had been summoned by something sacred. Maya stood frozen behind the counter, heart pounding. Luke turned toward her. "We ride for our own, and we remember the people who stand up for them when no one else will." One by one, riders stepped off their bikes and began to file into the diner. Quiet, respectful nods of recognition, not a single word of mockery, no judgment, just presence. The bell jingled again and again as the room filled with faces Maya had never seen. But somehow she felt she knew. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Luke handed her a sealed envelope. "It's from the brothers to cover what the town took from you." Maya opened it with shaking hands. Inside receipts for electricity paid in advance. Food suppliers restocked. Even a new coffee machine invoice and a handwritten note from someone named Red Dog that simply said, "You fed our brother when nobody else would. Now let us feed yours." Maya looked around the room, her chest heaving. For the first time in days, she felt warm from something that wasn't the moon. She looked out the window. The street was packed, not with anger, not with hate, with loyalty, with gratitude, with community. And in that moment she realized something important. Loyalty didn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wore leather. And when the world turned its back on you, sometimes the roar of 300 engines could be the loudest thank you you'd ever hear. The air in Pineville smelled different that evening. Not like chill or exhaust or that old tin tang of silence that had hung over the town for too long. This evening, the street outside Maya's diner smelled like brewing coffee-fried bacon leather and something else. Movement, possibility, change. The main road was still lined with bikes, some sleek and black, others wild with color and flags and names like Reapers of Mercy, Hell's Angels, and Southern Knuckleheads. Some riders had slept in their vans. Others stayed at motel down the highway, but most had stayed because they wanted to. And Maya, well, she had barely slept. Not from fear this time, from awe, from gratitude that felt too big for words. Inside the diner, the bell had barely stopped jingling since 6:30. Maya moved fast behind the counter, her apron already stained with syrup and grease refilling mugs calling out orders, giving soft nods and tight smiles as her hands worked non-stop. What had started with one plate of brisket for a tired man had become something more, something living. She handed a plate of pancakes to a biker with a long gray beard and turned to refill the coffee pot when she saw her. At first, Maya thought she was imagining it. Mrs. Edith Caldwell, hair pinned tight like always pressed beige cardigan purse, clutched to her side like it might run away. The same woman who once said just loud enough to be heard that she missed the days when folks knew their place. Now here she was sitting in a booth with a biker, a woman in a sleeveless leather vest, tattoos crawling up both arms, one braid of silver hair falling over her shoulder. She was talking, no demonstrating how to knit something, and Mrs. Edith. She was laughing. Not politely, not nervously. Actually laughing. Maya blinked. She turned to Gus, one of the weekend cooks she'd called in for help, and handed off the coffee pot. "Watch the line," she said quietly. "Be right back." She walked slowly towards the booth, not cautious, just unsure. Mrs. Edith looked up. Their eyes met. Maya waited. Mrs. Edith raised her cup of tea and nodded. "Evening, Miss Johnson," she said. Maya's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. The biker beside Edith, whose vest read Linda Vertical Bar, East Valley Chapter, smiled warmly. "She's learning to make fingerless gloves," Linda said to keep her hands warm, but still able to grip that coffee mug. Edith chuckled. "Told her if I'm going to sit with someone covered in tattoos, I might as well learn something useful." Linda leaned back, grinning. "Told her if I'm going to sit with someone who knits better than I ride, I better keep my ears open." Maya smiled slowly, unsure where the warmth in her chest was coming from. Maybe it was the moment. Maybe it was the fact that it had happened without a single speech, without a demand, just people sitting down together figuring it out. She nodded once, then turned back to the counter. Outside, she noticed the children first. There were about 8 of them, ranging from 5 to maybe 11. They ran between parked motorcycles like it was a playground. Their feet slapped the pavement, giggling as they weaved around exhaust pipes and kickstands. One boy, Jacob Turner, Maya, realized was climbing up to sit on the seat of a bright red Harley. When a biker with a skull cap and braided beard walked up, Maya tensed for a moment, her hand gripping the edge of the counter, but the biker just crouched beside the boy and said, "Careful now. You don't want to tip her, but if you want to sit, I'll show you how to do it right." Jacob nodded eagerly. The biker swung one arm under the seat, steadying it, then showed the boy where to put his feet and how to hold the handlebars. In another corner, a girl was braiding her Barbie's hair while watching a biker fix the laces on his boots. She asked a question. He knelt beside her and started showing her the knots. Maya watched it unfold in real time. No big announcements, no town meeting, just people showing up. Then the bell jingled again. She turned, expecting another rider. Instead, it was Deputy Sarah Klein. No uniform, no badge, just a gray shirt, jeans, and a tired face that looked more human than official. She stepped up to the counter and gave a quiet nod. "Coffee?" Maya asked, voice even. Sarah nodded. "Black, no sugar." Maya poured without a word. When she handed the mug across the counter, their fingers brushed for a moment. "Thank you," Sarah said. Maya looked at her. "Really?" Looked. There was something in her eyes. Regret, and maybe something softer. Resolution. Sarah sat at the counter watching the room. After a long moment, she spoke. "I heard what they did to your place last week." Maya didn't respond. Sarah sipped the coffee, swallowed slowly. "I should have said something or stopped it." "You didn't throw the eggs," Maya said quietly. "No," Sarah replied, "but I stood too still while others did." Maya said nothing. Sarah looked down into her mug. "I'm not proud of that." Silence hung for a beat. Then Maya reached into a basket and pulled out a fresh biscuit, still warm, set it on a plate, and placed it gently in front of her. "Eat." Sarah looked up, surprised. Maya offered the faintest shrug. Talking's easier on a full stomach. Sarah smiled just a little. Maya turned away and walked back to the pass window where Gus was calling out a stack of orders. She worked through the next hour on muscle memory, refilling coffee, sliding plates down the counter, catching questions, and giving quick answers. But her mind kept drifting to Edith, to Jacob, to Sarah. This wasn't a miracle, not yet. But it was something. It was a start. And maybe that's all change ever really was. Not fireworks, not speeches, just a booth with two people talking. A kid on a bike, a deputy without her badge. Maya moved to the corner of the diner and paused, watching her father's old photo on the wall. The one of him standing in the same spot behind the counter, apron-stained hands, strong eyes kind. She whispered under her breath, "You were right, Daddy. People can surprise you." Then she turned back to the room and kept working because the world didn't change all at once. It changed one table at a time. The early morning sun had begun to climb high behind the hills, casting long golden streaks across Main Street. The light filtered through the large front windows of Maya's diner, painting everything inside with a soft amber glow. It was the kind of light that made you stop and take a breath. The kind of light that made a moment feel bigger than itself. The diner was full. Every booth, every stool, every inch of counter space had a body behind it. Some wore leather vests with faded patches. Others wore Sunday shirts and dusty jeans. Laughter bounced off the walls. Plates clinked. The sound of lives crossing paths filled the air like music. Maya moved quickly between tables, coffee pot in one hand, napkins in the other, a dish rag tucked into the side of her apron. She smiled when she could, nodded when she couldn't. Her shoulders were tired, her feet ached, but her heart, it felt like it was finally beating in rhythm with the town again. She didn't see him come in at first. The bell over the door chimed gently, but no one turned to look. Not at first. Then someone did. Then a few more. And then the room fell quiet. Maya glanced up instinctively from the coffee she was pouring. A man stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, sturdy. His vest was black leather, crisp and clean. Across the back, the words were stitched bold and large. President Hell's Angels MC Riverside chapter. He stepped in with purpose, his boots heavy against the tile floor. Beside him, Luke followed eyes forward, jaw set. Maya felt something shift in the room. Not fear, not tension, respect. The man, Victor Kane, walked slowly to the center of the diner and paused. He looked around, eyes sharp but kind. Then he found Maya behind the counter. He walked over the chatter in the room, falling to a hush behind him. "You must be Maya," he said, voice deep and smooth, worn but clear. Maya gave a small nod. "That's me." Victor held out a hand. His grip was firm, steady. His palm was rough, but his touch was respectful. "I'm Victor," he said, "president of the Hell's Angels Riverside." She nodded again. "I've heard of you." "I've heard of you," he replied. There was something in his tone, not just politeness. Pride. Victor turned, raising a hand to the crowd. The diner fell completely silent. He didn't raise his voice, but when he spoke, every word landed like truth. "There are two things we live by in my world," he said. "Loyalty and respect. When someone gives us one, we give it back. And when someone risks everything to do what's right, we remember that too." He turned back toward Maya. This woman didn't know who we were, didn't care what patch we wore. All she saw was a man in pain, and she treated him like a person. When others turned away, she stepped forward. Victor reached into a canvas bag that Luke handed him. "I don't give these out often," he said. He pulled out a black leather vest folded with care. The stitching was fresh, Across the back in bold white thread, it read of the Hells Angels. And just below it, smaller, embroidered in red, protected, Maya's breath caught in her chest. She didn't move. Victor held it out. "From this day forward," he said, "Maya's diner rides under the protection of the Hells Angels." The room erupted, cheering applause. Tables shook under the weight of fists pounding in celebration. Boots stomped. Someone whistled loud and clear. Maya stood frozen eyes glassy. Victor leaned in his voice lower just for her. "You earn this. Not with fear, with decency. And that means more than any patch ever could." She took the vest slowly, reverently, her fingers tracing the letters as the noise around her thundered on. Then she looked up and noticed something else. A few faces from the town had come in. Locals who hadn't stepped foot inside since the mess began. Joe Larkin, the farmer, his daughter Elise, Edith Caldwell's son, and behind them a few others, hesitant, nervous, but present. Joe walked up first, hat in hand. He stood in front of Maya, shifting his weight awkwardly. I was wrong," he said, voice rough. "I saw what happened, and I didn't say anything. I'm sorry." Maya looked at him. His eyes were sincere. Scared, maybe, but sincere. She gave a slow nod. Elise reached out and touched Maya's arm. "My mom told me you used to give me free apple slices when I was little. She never forgot that." Maya smiled faintly. More hands came. More faces. One by one. Some whispered apologies. Some just nodded. But they came. And that was something. Maya stood tall, holding the vest in both hands. She stepped behind the counter, found a spot on the wall right next to her father's framed photo, the one with him smiling behind the grill, and hung the vest on a wooden peg. It looked right there, like it belonged. She turned back to the room filled with faces that were once strangers, now allies. Her chest lifted, her throat tightened. Victor raised his cup to Maya. The crowd followed to Maya. And in that moment, no one remembered skin color patches or politics. They remembered character. They remembered who had stood up when it mattered. Maya nodded once, slow and full of grace. Because honor didn't come from titles. It came from how you stood when standing cost you everything. The moon had just started to climb over the rooftops of Pineville when the bell above the diner's front door gave a quiet jingle. Maya was behind the counter halfway through, wiping down the pie case for the second time that evening. Her motions were automatic now. Clean rotate checked the glass, but her mind was far away. Somewhere between the events of the last week and the question she kept asking herself, what now? She didn't look up right away. Not until she heard the slow steps measured heavy. Not the kind of walk that rushed in for coffee before work, but the kind that carried weight. Memory. She turned. Jack Harlan stood in the doorway. The same black leather jacket, the same broad frame. But something was different now. His eyes, they were clearer, not lighter. There was still pain there, but something underneath had shifted, something deep, a quiet strength that wasn't there before. Maya set down the cloth. "Jack," she said, almost a whisper. He stepped inside, nodding once. His boots echoed gently on the tile. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said. "I'm always here," she replied, offering a soft smile. He stopped at the counter, looked around, let out a breath like he hadn't realized he'd been holding it until now. "It looks good," he said. "It's getting there." Maya replied, "Some day is better than others." He nodded slowly, then silence. Maya poured him a cup of coffee without asking. Set it in front of him. Black, just like last time, Jack wrapped his hands around the mug. They didn't shake anymore. He looked up at her, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite place. Then he spoke. She's improving. Maya blinked. Lily? He nodded. The new treatment, it's working. Her numbers are up, color's back in her face. She's laughing again. Maya felt her throat tighten. That's incredible. It is, he said softly. I didn't think we'd get this far. A pause. She asked me to come today. Maya tilted her head, eyebrows slightly raised. Jack looked down into his coffee, then back at her. She said, She wants to meet you. Maya froze. Me? He nodded. She said, and I quote, That woman sounds like who I hope I can be one day. For a second, the diner disappeared. The dishes, the humming fridge, the noise outside, all of it fell away. Maya stood still, hand resting gently on the counter, eyes locked with Jack's. She said that clear as day. Maya sat down across from him without thinking. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You already did, he replied. That day you brought me coffee. That day you told Derek to step back. That day you reminded me I was more than just the patch on my back or the pain in my chest. His voice grew quiet. You didn't just feed me. You made me visible again. And Lily, she needed that more than I realized. Maya swallowed hard emotions, rising fast now. She reached for a napkin and folded it once in her hand. Tell her I'd love to meet her. Jack smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. I was hoping you'd say that, he said. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He set it on the counter between them. What's this? Lily made you something. Maya opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a drawing. Colored pencil. A rough sketch of Maya behind the counter handing a mug of coffee to a man in a biker vest, over their heads in shaky handwriting. It read, Be kind, be brave. Maya's hands shook. Her chest ached in the best way. She looked up, eyes shimmering. I don't know what to say. You already said it, Jack repeated. That day you showed up. He stood slowly, leaving the mug half full. I'm taking her out of the hospital next week, he said. She wants to ride out here with me, meet you in person, sit at that booth by the window. Maya smiled through the tears. We'll have something special on the menu that day. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Maya. Yeah, she's alive because someone chose to be kind when they didn't have to be. He nodded once, firmly. Thank you. Then he stepped into the light and was gone. Maya stood in place for a long moment. She looked at the drawing again, set it down beside the register. Her hands trembled. Her heart was full. Outside, a few more bikes rolled by. Inside, the world felt quieter, but not empty. Full of something she couldn't name, but felt deeply. Hope. Not loud, just steady. Just real. Sometimes she thought it only takes one cup of coffee, one moment of seeing someone, one small act of courage. Sometimes that's enough to save a life. And sometimes, just sometimes, that life saves you right back. Early morning light poured through the windows of Maya's diner, casting soft gold across the booths and counters. Outside, the last of the motorcycles were pulling away one after another, chrome reflecting the rising sun as their engines hummed low and respectful. Not the roaring arrival of a few days ago, but a slow, deliberate departure. A goodbye. Inside, the diner was calm. Empty now, but not hollow. Maya moved behind the counter in silence, rag in hand, wiping down the clean surface with slow, even strokes. Not because it needed cleaning, but because it was the one ritual that grounded her, the one habit she hadn't let go of, no matter how the world shifted. A few steps away on the wall, just beside the photo of her mother taken nearly 2 decades ago on the day they first opened, hung the new black leather vest. Smooth, bold, a single line stitched across the back in clean white thread. Friend of the Hells Angels protected beneath it. A small note pinned with a pushpin. Thank you for seeing the man, not the patch, Lily. Maya had stood there a long time before hanging it, holding it, feeling the weight of what it meant, what it cost, and what it gave back. The bell above the door jingled softly. Maya didn't turn right away. She finished her last wipe across the counter, folded the rag neatly, and only then looked up. Sheriff Derek Mason stood in the doorway. No hat, no sunglasses, no swagger, just a man in a tan shirt sleeves rolled with tired eyes and a stiffness in his stance that didn't come from pride, but from hesitation. His gaze drifted around the diner, scanning the quiet space, then settled on the vest. He stood there for a beat longer before stepping forward slowly. Maya didn't speak. She just reached under the counter, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and set it on the counter in front of him without ceremony. He nodded once in thanks and sat down. For a few seconds, the only sound in the diner was the gentle creak of the stool and the quiet hum of the refrigerator motor. Derek wrapped his hands around the mug, but didn't drink right away. Then he finally spoke. Town's changing. Maya didn't respond. She picked up the rag again, started wiping the already spotless edge of the pass through window. Derek cleared his throat, eyes still fixed on the dark liquid in his cup. You got folks talking. Never thought I'd see Edith Caldwell knit with a biker or Joe Larkin shake hands with anyone who had ink up to their jawline. Maya still said nothing. He shifted in his seat. I was raised a certain way, he said slowly, taught to keep order, keep things in line. Trouble shows up, you press back. You don't question much, just follow the rules. His voice faltered. But maybe some of those rules weren't made for the right reasons. Maya paused, then turned toward him. Her face was calm, quiet, unmoved. Maybe they were just made to protect the wrong people, she said. Derek looked at her, his jaw tightened slightly. But he didn't argue. I'm not proud of what I let happen here, he said. I saw what they did to your place. I saw the fear in that man's eyes when I walked in. I should have known better. Maya let the words hang in the air. She didn't forgive him. She didn't thank him. She just let him sit with the weight of it, because some things weren't fixed by a single conversation. Some things had to be earned. Derek finally took a sip of the coffee, set the mug down gently. You ever think about running for town council? He asked, a weak attempt at levity. Maya raised an eyebrow. He smiled sheepishly. Didn't think so. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his badge. Set it gently on the counter. I'm taking a few weeks off, he said. Maybe longer. Got some things I need to unlearn. Maya looked at the badge, then back at him. You don't have to leave. I know, he said, but I probably should. She gave a small nod. Derek stood, picked up his hat from the side hook, and held it in his hands for a moment. As he turned to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't back down. Maya didn't look up. She just folded the rag and placed it beside the register. Then she said without turning, I didn't know how. Derek stood there a second longer, then pushed open the door and stepped out into the rising light. The bell gave one last soft jingle, and then he was gone. Maya stood behind the counter, arms crossed lightly over her chest eyes, scanning the room. It was just a diner. Floors scuffed from boots, booths worn from years of elbows and stories, the hum of a fridge, the ticking of the old wall clock her mother used to reset by hand every Sunday morning. But it had become something more. Not because it was loud, but because it never looked away. It had fed the hungry, protected the vulnerable, told the truth even when the truth came with a cost. She walked over to the wall, and stood in front of the photo again. Her mother's smile, bright and full of belief, seemed to meet hers, now with new meaning. Maya reached up and adjusted the vest on the hook just slightly. Then she whispered more to herself than anyone else. "We're still standing, Mama." And she was because change didn't always come in a roar. Sometimes it came in a refusal to bend, in a coffee cup handed to a stranger, in a window cleaned after being shattered, in a woman behind a counter who chose to see people, not uniforms, not patches, not fear, just people. And for a town like Pineville, that was the kind of change that mattered most. No banners, no headlines, just quiet courage practiced daily, one seat at a time. The story of Maya Jack and the quiet little diner in Pineville isn't just about a place. It's about choices, about what we do when no one's watching, about the simple, everyday courage to show kindness, even when the world gives us every reason not to. It reminds us that sometimes standing up for someone else doesn't take grand speeches or bold gestures. Sometimes it's just a cup of coffee placed gently in front of a stranger. A word spoken when silence feels safer. A refusal to look away. And maybe that's how change really begins, with small, steady acts of decency. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a quiet act of courage, or maybe experienced one yourself? Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We read each one, and your words matter here. And if you believe in stories that speak to the heart and honor human dignity, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling these kinds of stories, ones that carry light, even in the quietest corners. Thank you for watching and for choosing kindness. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.